Welcome back to the Timeout Podcast. It's been a while, but we're back after about a year and a half absence. We're joined today by Nico, EliteTakes, and my co-host Jad Nizam.
What's up?
Thanks, Nico, for joining us today. We're really excited to have you on. And, the last couple of days of the NFL offseason have been like on fire. So
Oh
we
yeah.
definitely got
Oh yeah.
some big topics to discuss today. I guess
Mhm.
we could just get right into it. Um, You've talked a lot on your social media about Saquon Barkley and the Eagles offense. And,
Mhm.
Saquon, like you said, was the first player with multiple 60 plus yard touchdown runs. He also needs 149 more rush yards to break the all-time record, including the playoffs. So just like a complete explosion this year for him after coming over from the Giants. What are your thoughts on the significance of that addition for the Eagles and how much it would help them in the upcoming playoff games?
Well, I think when you have a team like the Eagles that just has an amazing offensive line and they've had an amazing rushing scheme for years, they are one of those few teams that really did have the luxury to go out and get Saquon. And, it has been a little probably more inconsistent than people want to admit at times, but he just consistently hits the big plays. He wears defenses down. There'll be some sort of breakdown in their run defense late in the fourth quarter, and then he can really put these games away. So I think that's really the big effect is just wearing these defenses down and trying to sort of torch them methodically, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And we definitely saw that in the Rams game. I think this week, against Washington, that happened in the first meeting against Washington in Philadelphia on Thursday Night Football. He had those two huge touchdown runs in the fourth quarter after the Washington defensive line had been competing really well, I would say, for those first three quarters. And then the second game was just total chaos, total shootout. So, yeah, I think Washington's run defense has really not been that good this year. I mean, even in their last game against Detroit, they really forced their turnovers through the air. That's really where the defense was able to make their mark outside of the offense just being completely unstoppable.
Yeah.
So I do expect Saquon to have probably another signature game here. Not anywhere close to the biggest of the year because he's just had some ridiculous stat lines. But yeah, no, I think he's going well over 100 yards, and I think he will be their most productive offensive player.
Yeah, and with all these running backs having like these bounce back years, Derrick Henry, Saquon, Joe Mixon, like what do you think about the resurrection of like the running back position and like the whole like narrative that there's no value to it or it was the least valuable position? Like I think all these performances are really showing like how much of a playmaker they can really be.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the way I see it is that not every team can just go out and invest heavily in a running back, but I do really think that any team that has an offensive infrastructure already and a good offensive line or maybe just a really good rushing quarterback to complement the running back and, create a numbers advantage against defenses, those are the teams that definitely have the liberty to go out and do that. Like, the Lions, they did it 2 years ago with Gibbs. We've seen the Eagles, we've seen the Ravens. The Ravens don't have the most amazing offensive line, but it really is because of Lamar that
Mhm.
Derrick Henry is able to still be maximized and still be worth the investment. We saw it in San Francisco last year. I kind of think the 49ers with Christian McCaffrey were what really inspired Howie Roseman to go out and give Saquon the bag. So, for the worst teams in the league, yeah, no, you probably still do not want to draft a running back really high or sign a big time running back in free agency. Just because it's not really going to work if you can't block for them, if you don't have that rushing quarterback. But, we're seeing all these playoff caliber teams and they add them and it's well worth it. So I really just think that running backs are definitely valuable. You just have to be in the right position to make that investment.
Yeah, and going off of that, I saw that you were talking about the other day how Bijan Robinson is like seeing his extension money go up in real
Oh,
time
yeah.
watching Saquon. Like, I think that's really cool that, like you said, like it's specific to the teams that are they have the structure in place to pay those running backs. Like the Falcons, very young team, fairly young team, like just got Michael Penix into the starting role. Bijan's obviously a playmaker. Kyle Pitts had a bit of an improvement this year, and obviously Drake London we could see towards the end of the
Oh, yeah.
season was Penix's go-to guy. And so, like, I feel like with teams like that, like especially the Falcons, the potential is like through the roof. And if you could keep those kind of
Absolutely.
guys together, like even if it means maybe paying a little bit more than you want to the running back position, I feel like it's more than worth it to keep that collection of skill intact for the future.
Absolutely. And the Falcons are one of those teams that have had the offensive line for years now, and they were kind of messing around with like Tyler Algier, but now that you feature Bijan, he's pretty much just unstoppable in that scheme, and that is going to be their identity moving forward. And now that they have Michael Penix on the cheap contract, and hopefully they can start moving off of all that money they paid Kirk, yeah, it's going to be well worth it. I think he's going to get a huge extension, and it's going to be smart of them.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
a big part of that offensive success is the play calling. And so that could kind of
Yeah,
segue us into the next thing because as much as
sure.
these head coaching hires around the league have been like obviously very significant, the most recent being Liam Cohen, a star play caller going in a crazy situation from
Unbelievable.
Tampa to
Yeah,
Jacksonville. But offensive coordinators are very important in this league. And so one that I wanted to ask you about, I mean, I think you can kind of see why over here. So
sure,
Josh
sure.
McDaniels to the Patriots under Mike Vrabel. I saw that you said you don't love it and you don't hate it. So I wanted to hear more of your thoughts on that because obviously, it's his third stint with the team, left twice for two failed head coaching jobs in Denver and then Vegas, and both didn't even last more than 2 seasons. And so I think like it's kind of clear that McDaniels, if he does succeed with New England and with Drake May now, like he's probably not going to leave for a head coaching job anytime soon. So like that was probably a factor in that decision. And like they've talked about how he spent this last year like going to college teams and kind of like
Yes.
refining his system a little bit. So what do you think about that hire and how it could help Drake May after he had a pretty solid rookie season and showed a lot of flashes?
Yeah, I mean, I think we know who Josh McDaniels has been in the past, but after hearing about like his whole college story, he's at Ohio State and at USC, and those are just both offenses with very different elements than what he's used to. He could be like a rejuvenated mind, and I don't completely know what we're going to get out of him. I would say like judging off what we've seen from him so far, my concern is that he's always had a more of a conservative passing game like with what we saw with Mac Jones and Cam Newton. I wasn't totally sure if he's really the guy that can give Drake May the launch codes, if you know what I mean. And I know Patriots fans always had a lot of frustration with how conservative he was, especially on like those third downs and
Green
throwing all
passes on
those
third and
and
long.
playing for field goals. So it really will be interesting to see like is Mike Vrabel going to be one of those hyper aggressive coaches that rides their young quarterback like the way we've seen with Dan Quinn in Washington? Um, or is he just going to try to go back to his style in Tennessee, which is really just trying to play a physical, slow paced game and win with special teams and defensive turnovers and all of that? So I think Josh McDaniels, like you said, the main advantage is 100% the continuity because anytime you nail a hire of a young star play caller, you're going to have to reset very quickly, and that just makes things hard on the quarterbacks. You're having to learn new systems every offseason. So I actually would say when they announced McDaniels, I was at like, okay, it's probably like a C plus. I don't love it. I don't hate it. The more I think about it, the more I'm at like a B plus with it because I can't be 100% sure that he's changed from the past. But there is reason for optimism, especially because I also saw some of the assistants he's bringing in. He's
Mhm.
bringing in a guy from Ohio State. I don't know
Yeah,
if
I
you
just
saw
saw
that
that
news
this
this
morning. Yeah.
morning. So it does seem like he is taking that influence seriously from his college tour last year. So I am intrigued.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited as a fan to see what he can unlock with Drake. Like you said, like we kind of know where what McDaniels is kind of like ceiling is, but I mean he's never like obviously he had Tom Brady, but I mean in recent years like he had Mac Jones and Cam Newton, like no one
Did.
really on the level of Drake May. And he
Oh yeah,
obviously it wasn't just the offense. The defense was lights out Mac Jones's rookie year, but they were the one seed in the AFC at one point, and they had like the number six, I believe, scoring offense. So with a quarterback like that and like not insane receivers, like we had like Nelson Aguilar, Jacoby Myers, like guys like that, like obviously solid players, but no one really that can like completely change the game. I'm excited to
sure.
see where I can go.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. And I do honestly think like people overrated the situation in New England. Honestly, for Mac Jones's rookie success as well, I think it really was him and McDaniels. And it was weird to see what happened to Mac after that, in my opinion, because I was really impressed by his rookie year. So maybe we do have to give all the credit to McDaniels because I really did not think that supporting cast was very talented.
Mhm.
Yeah. Speaking of all this offensive coordinator drama, the Texans moved off Bobby Slowick this morning in a little bit surprising, but I think it was the right move. And in my opinion, the number one thing is just getting an experienced play caller in there that's been there before. And I saw that you were like heavily on the Doug Peterson train, which I like.
Yes,
I
I
also
am.
like Chip Kelly. So I just wanted to know, what are your thoughts on what the Texans should do going forward with that position?
Yeah, no, I really am a fan of them potentially bringing in Doug Peterson or
Mhm.
Chip Kelly because those guys are experienced play callers and they have flamed out as head coaches. So similar to Josh McDaniels, you really could have long-term continuity. You could have your offensive version of like Steve Spagnuolo in Kansas City, which would just be absolutely huge. And I generally thought like the system was help CJ Stroud, but it definitely wasn't going to help him reach his ceiling, running the Shanahan style offense that's usually meant for less talented quarterbacks than him, like the Brock Purdy's and the Tuas of
Mhm.
the world. And just generally so conservative on early downs. They really wanted
Yeah.
to establish the run when they couldn't really block the run. And the offensive line is the problem in Houston more than anything. I do believe that. I think um, the fact that they fired their offensive line coach was honestly
Yeah.
probably more important than firing Bobby Slowick because they were just a disaster. They couldn't block anything. They couldn't pick up any blitzes. Any creative defensive mind just absolutely destroyed them. So there were definitely coaching issues. And I think moving forward, you do want a guy with experience, a guy that really is hyper focused on letting the quarterback shine in the offense and not just trying to be productive through the ground and leveraging that to pass the football like the Shanahan system usually does, if you know what I mean. So, yeah,
Mhm.
Doug Peterson, Chip Kelly, those are both like Andy Reid kind of guys. And I think if they shift their offense more to something similar in Kansas City, where they actually do put the ball in the hands of their quarterback more often, it would be successful. And those guys would be long term play callers. So, yeah, I'm all aboard Doug Peterson or Chip Kelly. I probably would lean towards Doug Peterson, though, because
Mhm.
it's more of a pass heavy guy. Chip Kelly is a little bit more of a run game guy, but he does come from Ohio State, obvious connections to Stroud there. So um, I think either would be a home run.
Yeah, I 100% agree. With Slowick's system, you just had like tight ends going one-on-one with edge rushers. Like
Hmm.
it just felt very predictable. Like runs on for it'd be run on first down, run on second down, then you get to the long third down. So I'm just happy to see the Texans move off of him.
For sure.
And you were one of the biggest you were pretty big on Ben Johnson to the Raiders just because having that continuity
Was.
with the head coach and general manager. And I just 100% agree. Obviously, it didn't go the Raiders' way. Um, and they settled with Pete Carroll. And what were your thoughts on that?
I honestly don't have a big opinion on it until we see what his staff is, because the way I see it, Pete Carroll, he's 73 years old. He's
Yeah.
obviously not going to be in this for the long haul. So I
Mhm.
really do think Tom Brady's plan is like for him to come in, establish the culture, facilitate this rebuild because he is an excellent leader. But I think what's going to be very important to watch out for is like who his offensive coordinator is and or who his defensive coordinator is, because I think the ultimate plan is for him to like mentor some of these assistants and make someone the successor to him down the road, because he only got a 3-year deal, which was interesting because they gave John Spytek, their new general manager, a 5-year deal. So it seems like this pairing is not set in stone for a very long time. So I am very interested to see who he hires. I do trust Pete Carroll a lot. I think if anyone's going to know the right guys, it's probably him. He's got a great history of assistants. You see Dan Quinn and Dave Canales, two of his guys, how they're thriving right now as head coaches. So I do think it's an interesting idea. I honestly thought that Todd Monken was the guy to go to after missing out on Ben Johnson, just because I did kind of want them to get that permanent offensive play caller more than anything. But it's not a bad hire by any means. I'm glad Pete Carroll's back in the game. It's fun. It's fun for sure.
There's been a lot of smoke this morning, obviously, since it just happened today, but Russell Wilson potentially going to Vegas to kind of be that bridge guy, like you said, like similar to the
Yeah.
head coach, but be that bridge guy until they get, a young quarterback. They could trade up in the draft. Doesn't really feel like they're in like the prime position to do so, and like no, obviously not in the prime position to take one of the top quarterbacks. But let's transition a little bit to the draft. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this stuff. So I feel like, you know, it started off, everyone knew it would be two quarterbacks up at the top and Travis Hunter. And then in recent weeks, I feel like ever since Penn State, like in their performances in the playoffs, Abdul Carter has kind of like shot up the draft boards. And now um people are talking about him like he's like the best prospect in the draft. The Titans were talking about how they're going to take a generational, they're not going to pass on a generational player at number one. So that kind of feels like Adam Schefter said too, like it's either the wide receiver cornerback from Colorado and Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, edge rusher from Penn State. Um, Obviously, no one can guess how the draft is going to go. Like people assume kind of where teams lean, but I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on like the top five, top four of the draft and how that's going to shake out because I feel like in recent years it's been a bit easier to kind of like pinpoint where each team is going to go. Everyone knew last year top three were going to be quarterbacks. They knew who the quarterbacks were going to be. There was some like late JJ McCarthy smoke, but um, it ended up being the three that everyone always knew was going to go top three. So yeah, just I'm curious to hear what you think about the top of the draft this year.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly do think the quarterback smoke at the top isn't a given. I think especially when you look at Tennessee, they just hired a new general manager. He's not in a position where he has to get his quarterback and really get this operation going. I think a lot of times these first-time general managers, if you just pick the best player on the board and they turn out good, no one's going to be mad at you. So
Mhm.
I definitely think that I actually do think Tennessee is going to pass on a quarterback. Because even when you look at these prospects, is it really that much better than just giving Levis another year or signing a bridge guy and then just kicking the can down the road at the quarterback position? If you get Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter's, like those are just home runs and they fill needs, and no one's going to complain about that. I think Cleveland will be in the market for a quarterback, maybe not at number two though. Their coaching staff has a lot of connections to Jalen Milroe, so I'm starting to wonder like maybe they trade down or maybe they try to go after Milroe like in the second round or something. The Giants are the one team I am convinced is going to take a quarterback just because that is like the hottest of seats going into next season, Brian Dable and Joe Shane. No one has more pressure on them to show some life. And really they haven't had life specifically because of the quarterback position ever since 2022. So I honestly think first two position. I think Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are probably going to be the top two picks. And then a quarterback to the Giants, and then the Patriots. Probably their pick of the two Michigan guys, Mason Graham, uh, Will Johnson, and then the Jags at five, the other Michigan guy. That's kind of how I see it playing out right now.
That'd be scary. Will Johnson and Christian Gonzalez in the same secondary.
Ooh, I
Obviously,
know
I'm
it
praying
would.
one of Travis or Abdul Carter falls to us, but I mean, Will Johnson or Mason Graham are not
I know.
consolation prizes at all. And like what you were talking about with the quarterbacks, like obviously Cam Ward and Shador Sanders are in all likelihood the top two. And it just feels like this year has been like in recent years, the quarterbacks like last year, Caleb, Jaden, and Drake were all like people knew they were going to be blue chip talents. And like I feel like there's a little bit more gray area with these quarterbacks. Like they haven't
Oh
done
yeah.
as much, haven't shown as much on film at the college level. Obviously, Cam Ward had a nutty year last year, but like there are still some things to clean up for both quarterbacks. So I'm excited to see what happens. I feel like as a biased Patriots fan, I feel like, whatever happens at four, I feel like we're gonna end up with a great player no matter what. Like obviously that last win, I love winning, but like come on. Me and Jad were together right after it happened and going back to the thing you said about Brian Dable, like I was sitting next to Jad and I got the notification that Mayo was fired and I was like, whoa. Like right after we just won the game, not even 2 hours later. And my first thought was because I was under the impression Dayball and Shane were going to be let go. So I was like, oh,
Ooh, I was shocked.
immediately. immediately Dayball could come in as the new OC under the new staff.
Yep.
You know, Patriots ties. I feel like that's how it always goes. Robert Kraft like picks guys that he knows, no matter how many years they go somewhere else. Like they always end up coming back to New England somehow. But yeah, I don't know. The draft is I feel like the most exciting time of the season, and I feel like right now we're in like right after the Super Bowl ends, it's kind of like the worst part of the off season because all of it is just rumors, 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 like, and it just gets to the point where I don't even want to like scroll through Twitter anymore because people are just
Yeah.
talking crazy. Like, but then once free agency starts, the draft starts to get going and things start to pick up. It's exciting. And I know Jad wanted to talk to you about something with the Dolphins, so relating to the
Sure.
draft and like all that stuff. So Jad,
Yeah.
I'll let you take over.
Yeah, so knowing that you're a Dolphins fan, what do you think is next? Like, let's say you were the owner of the Dolphins, what would be your next move going forward with them?
I mean, I've been pretty vocal, especially late in the season, that I just think that this whole thing with McDaniel and Tua and this whole trying to compete for a Super Bowl, it's just the ceiling is not high enough. So I'd like to start trying to slowly move on from this core of guys. But it's a little too early to do that because you just gave Tua the extension. Um, and ultimately, I think it's best to just reset in as many spots as possible at the same time. So I think this year they will continue to try to compete, and I don't blame them for doing so. Like you're not going to blow it up right now. I do hope they trade Tyreek Hill though. I am serious that I do hope that they trade Tyreek Hill this offseason, and just get off that contract because I'm just trying to get off contracts at this point. Like that's my main mentality. And they do have a lot of draft picks, which will be good and start to filter in more young talent. I just hope they emphasize the trenches because that is really what's biting us, specifically on the offensive line. I just feel like we've built a soft team. I feel like we've built our team like a college football team where you're trying to get receivers that can beat everyone down the field and you can't actually win these physical games. So I just hope that they try to draft a lot of good players, don't really reach for needs, do get a backup quarterback. That is a big thing because next year, if you're trying to compete, you obviously need a better backup for anything that happens to Tua. But I do think moving forward, I am trying to get off some of the contracts of the older guys, and I'm not really that excited about Tua long term. Um, I guess you got to ride this contract out with him for the time being, though. So yeah, I'm a little down right now. I feel like next year is kind of like bordering on a waste of time just because I know that they're not going to make anything really that exciting of it. Um, but if they can start to make the little moves that make it easier to rebuild again down the road, then I'll be fine.
Yeah, as a Patriots fan, obviously I get a very close look at the Dolphins every year, and even when Brady was around, like at home we would usually win, but you guys have always had our number at least once a year. And in
Yep.
recent years it's been a bit more than once a year. But like I've always thought, I guess this could be like a boring take because everyone thinks the same, but like watching so many Dolphins games, like it just feels like the opening script and the game plan are like not like top, and if anything like shakes a little bit and they kind of have to move off that, that's when teams kind of take over against the Dolphins. Like
Yep.
I hesitate to say Tua's a system quarterback, but I kind of feel like he is. Like he he's shown flashes, and obviously he earned his contract. Maybe not, shouldn't have been that
Did.
high, but like he definitely played really well and earned his money. But I just feel like, they have those scripts that they follow most games, and like a lot of times it works out for them. They get out to really early leads, big plays to like Tyreek, Jalen Waddle down the field. But like you said, like those like physical games where you have to play fully for 60 minutes and where you might get like punched in the mouth and have to come back. Like this is going back 10, 11 years, but I always think of when I think of 60-minute games, I think of that 2014 divisional round game where Baltimore came to New England and we were down by
Yes.
14 twice in that game. And that was the Josh McDaniels play, double pass from Edelman to Amendola that
Yep.
kind
Yep.
of broke it open. And I just think of games like that, like teams like that who are built tough, contrary to what you said, like the Dolphins are built kind of soft right now. Like I agree where I feel like it could be easy to kind of like jump at exciting players and not really like get what you have to get to slowly build back up. Like obviously
Hmm.
if a generational talent falls to you, like obviously you're gonna take them. But I really liked what you said where you kind of have to make like the little moves to make it easier and not just try to go for the home run at every position, every free agency deal. And I mean, I don't want to say I'm excited for you guys because I don't want you to be good, but
I'm not excited for us either, bro.
but no, I think you guys can chill out for a bit. We hopefully are on an uptick right now. Patriots,
Yeah,
hopefully Vrabel can turn us around. We just got, his guy Stretch from the Rams that he taught. I don't
that's a
know if
big
you,
one.
yeah, I don't know if you've seen
Yeah.
his Bussin' with the Boys interviews where he talks about Stretch a lot and the importance of him with like
Mhm.
game management. He's kind of like the Ernie Adams to Bill Belichick, Stretch to Mike Vrabel, like game management, watching film, all that stuff. So I'm excited, man. I'm excited to see where this goes. Um, but speaking of like we were talking about if you were the owner of the Dolphins and like all the new head coaches coming in, I feel like you've been pretty vocal about the importance of head coach and GM coming in together. And so
Yes.
I want to hear you elaborate a bit more on that and maybe like, Patriots have Elliott Wolf kind de facto GM. There's no like official title that he's the general manager, but he has roster control. But it sounded like Mike Vrabel is also going to have heavy influence on that. He brought in his guy Ryan Cowden from the Giants, and so I just want to hear you talk about that a bit more and like the
Sure.
what that means to bring in those two guys together who are on the same page and have that kind of connection. Because going back to the Dolphins, like McDaniel and Chris Greer, like it feels like it's like kind of going
It's a little
down a
funky.
slippery slope right
Yeah.
now. But yeah, I'm trying to hear your thoughts on
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I feel like the NFL, like there are a lot of different teams that have different visions of the way they want to play, and they emphasize different positions and they run different schemes. And I feel like if you can bring in a head coach and guys with a lot of personnel power that are both just trying to build the exact same type of team and get players to fit the schemes or to fit their identity, I feel like that has really proven lately to be the best process is just reset at those two spots at once. And I specifically I just always think about the Lions rebuild and what made it so great. And it's probably the fact that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes came in at the exact same time. And just every move they've made is just like, yeah, that makes sense. We know how this team wants to roll. They're bringing in all these tough guys, these hungry guys. They're bringing in a bunch of physicality in the trenches, and then they started sprinkling the skill talent on top of guys like JMO and Gibbs. Like it was a very clear vision, and I think also like in Minnesota, Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, um, they have been all about building up the infrastructure, and then they made their move for JJ McCarthy. And
Mhm.
I think if you have guys in lockstep in terms of what they want to do at the quarterback position and what they want to do with the supporting cast, like that just it's really valuable to me. Whereas if you got a general manager hired after the coach or a head coach hired after the general manager, they might have different ideas for how the team wants to look, and that can create some weird power struggles. I mean, that's kind of what happened with Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. Like he wasn't really on the same wavelength as Rand Carthon, and now both of them are out of the picture.
Yeah.
I mean, in Miami, Chris Greer has been around for a decade, and then they try to like shovel Mike McDaniel into the picture and expect those guys to be in lockstep. It just doesn't always work that way. So I think in New England, New England is just a very tight-knit franchise. Everyone knows each other. They all have the same general ideas of how they want to build the team. So I'm not really too concerned by the fact that Elliott Wolf has been there because I think that Mike Vrabel is just like an upgraded version of trying to do what Gerard Mayo was trying to do, but he's just way better at it. He's more experienced at it, but he's just going to execute the ideas in a better way. So yeah, no, I think you look at Jacksonville right now. I love that they're going to be able to get Liam Cohen, the general manager. You look at Vegas. I'm sure that Pete Carroll and John Spytek are going to be on the same page. That was kind of my one like fear in Chicago with Ben Johnson why it could not work is because, I don't really trust Ryan Poles. And Bears fans can say all they want how Ben Johnson loves Ryan Poles and they're going to have the same ideas of how to improve the team. But I don't know. I don't know. I just think it's always best to start fresh in as many areas as possible so that you can really build everything up together. And everything is just interconnected. And, I'm speaking with a lot of general words, but I think it's just good to have a cohesive vision and a lot of synergy across the organization with everyone in their jobs.
Yeah, and I think solidifying your roster before you could draft your franchise quarterback and whatnot is extremely important. And you mentioned how the Giants are probably going to go in that direction. And I saw a stat that said Malik Neighbors um and the Giant Tyrone Tracy are the first rookie duo to each go for 1,000 scrimmage yards. And so, what do you think about their situation going forward and
I,
actually drafting a quarterback?
yeah, no, I think
Especially,
their situation is underrated.
yeah, I agree.
Like I
Dable especially.
Dable Dable is definitely good good offensive mind, good quarterbacks coach. He makes things easy for his guys. Like that's how they made the playoffs in 2022 for Daniel Jones. And I do think that he is just desperate to open things up and get back to his ways in Buffalo with Josh Allen, get a bigger armed guy, a guy who can extend plays and just dart balls down the field. Like they have had no deep passing game for like 3 years now. And their offensive line was much improved this year. Like
Yeah.
all the Evan Neal jokes of the past, they're kind of
Yep.
gone. Like they bring in Carmen Bercio, and now their pass protection is pretty solid. And now you've got Neighbors, who's just a clear future superstar. You've got Tracy. They've got some more spots to fill. I think Slayan is kind of nice. So yeah, no, I think the Giants situation is very solid. Like there isn't going to be one specific area of the team that's very obviously holding a young quarterback back as they go in there. So yeah, I think Cam Ward, a guy like him, kind of fits what Dayball will want, and I think he'd be in a solid spot to succeed. And it's just kind of on him at that point. And that's what you want is to create a situation where if the quarterback isn't succeeding, it's on them. And I think the Giants are kind of in that situation right now where they need the quarterback to actually be good, and it's not a matter of if they can support him.
Makes sense. And staying on the topic of young quarterbacks, I'm gonna shift back to Chicago in that situation
Sure.
because obviously, like, very coveted job because of Caleb Williams. The Ryan Poles situation makes it a little
Yeah.
iffy. I know Jad was very vocal to me that he thought Ben Johnson should go to the Patriots over Vrabel. He thought he was the better candidate. Obviously because like you were talking about earlier, being able to maximize Drake May and whoever the young quarterback is, like it will be Caleb this time. Um, like what I want you to expand a little bit on how you think that dynamic is going to be with Ben Johnson and Caleb because you know I'm pretty sure you talked about how from that video from Hallis Hall how like he's a bit more of a leader than you expected to see and
Yes.
um you also talked about how in one of his introductory pressers he was talking about how his system is going to be a little bit different than it was in Detroit and how like you specifically mentioned how Goff was like one of 11 guys and how this time it kind of feels like he's gonna, you know, work through Caleb and work with Caleb to maximize his abilities and not just like, oh, you're one guy on the offense. Everyone has to like work together in that sense. But yeah, I'm curious to hear what you think about that. And like I know you wanted, like we were talking about Ben Johnson on the Raiders, but now that he does end up in Chicago, like a lot of people
Yeah.
thought, how do you think that's gonna play out?
Yeah, I mean, Caleb is kind of a confusing quarterback for me because he spent like half of the year playing like Jared Goff and the other half of the year playing like a rookie Josh Allen. Like it was
Yeah.
just really weird. Like he totally changed his play style throughout the year and he showed flashes of being good at both. So I am really interested with Ben Johnson because I really did think that his philosophy was like, I want to build out the system and I want a pocket passer who's just going to get the ball to my guys and be efficient, but we got to be able to protect him. And now I feel like he goes to Chicago, and the reason he went to Chicago is just because he loves Caleb Williams that much and wants to like take his offense to the next level. Like it
Yeah.
almost feels like when McVay went from Goff to Stafford, like
Mhm.
he wants the big boy with the big arm uh, to work with. So I think one thing I am interested in is how he's going to tap into Caleb's mobility because Jared Goff just wasn't really getting on the move at all in Detroit, and that feels like something with Caleb that you want to capitalize on. And their personnel is pretty different from Detroit. Like the reason I like Vegas is because like yeah, you could see Brock Bowers and the Amon-Ra St. Brown role, and you can see how their offensive line can really get the run game going. Meanwhile, Chicago's kind of like Miami, where they have these receivers and they don't really have the offensive line build out. They have these skill position guys. Rome Odunze is like just a really nice contested catcher. DJ Moore is a yards after catch guy. So I think he will be changing his offense a little more. Probably spreading things out. He liked to play a really physical brand in Detroit, a lot of tight ends, like condensed formations. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly how that's going to evolve, but I do think we're going to see a more aggressive kind of opened up offense because clearly, if he went to Chicago, he loves Caleb and he thinks Caleb is can be more than just the Jared Goff type. So I am very intrigued by the fact that he says he wants to change his system and that he's not just going to try to teach Caleb to be a more polished pocket passer and have him play that way and just take advantage of his arm from the pocket. So we'll see how he gets his legs involved.
Hopefully for
Yeah,
their sake, they hit on their free agency offensive linemen.
Yes. Yes.
Obviously, they can go through the draft, but you kind of want to open it up to, snag maybe some other needs in the draft. And there's not like amazing, there are not a lot of offensive linemen, offensive tackles, especially that are going to hit the open market, like Trey Smith, Ronnie Stanley. But I don't know. I mean, again, as a Patriots fan, I'm hoping those guys hit free agency because our offensive line is a dumpster fire right now. I think we had the second most offensive linemen starting since 1999 after the Rams in 2022. Like we had like through the first 6 or 7 weeks, there were like seven different offensive line combinations. And like people really underestimate that part. Like me and Jad have had discussions in the past about the situations that the rookie quarterbacks from last year were going to and how Chicago and New England are very different situations. But people really don't like I guess obviously people talk about it, but it's a really underrated thing about how an offensive line can completely like derail a season. And obviously the
Absolutely.
Patriots weren't like amazingly equipped in the skill positions, but I feel like Drake May could have done a whole lot more if he actually had a line this year. And the flashes that he showed were pretty impressive given the circumstances around him. And like, I don't know, like the couple times that he's gotten banged up is because he's taken like a ton of hits the entire game. He's been sacked like 5 or 6 times a couple times, and like it's just brutal to watch your young, promising quarterback who can make anything happen at any given moment. Like you even saw against the Dolphins, we were down like 25, but that like rollout explosion deep ball to Austin Hooper down the field for the touchdown.
Austin
Like
Hoover.
that
Yep.
was just I know you've been pretty cool about Austin Hoover in the past, but um like things like that, that play happened because the offensive line got pummeled within like a second and he had to run out and throw the ball across his body down the field while he was about to get walloped. Like it's just hopefully for Chicago, they can get their offensive line in check so that they can continue to build around Caleb and Ben Johnson can kind of do what he wants to do instead of having to like settle for stuff in the draft when there are other good players
Yeah.
that he wants for his system. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I'm really excited for this offseason, not just for the Patriots, but for a bunch of teams to see how things kind of shake up because I feel like there's a lot of like young brewing situations in the league right now, or like teams that are almost there that are just like ready to get unlocked, whether it be through new quarterbacks, coaches, or just the structure around them. So it's pretty intriguing. I'm excited to see.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the result of what happens a year after you have this amazing quarterback classes. Those first years are just generally going to be very ugly, no matter who you got.
Mhm.
And I kind of hope on the topic of offensive lines, I kind of hope more teams follow the Panthers model with what they did for Bryce Young after his first year. We just talked about how you shouldn't just be paying guys whenever. You should have a structure. You should make the little moves. You should slowly build your team up. But the Panthers just did not care about that, and they went out and paid good linemen so they could have a good offensive line, and it worked. It costed a lot, but it worked, and it really unlocked everything else in terms of Bryce and the offense around them. The offense was pretty good by the end of the year. Their run game was humming. So I don't think it's irresponsible for rebuilding teams to pay aging offensive linemen because ultimately the offensive line is the number one thing that you have to have a decent offensive structure for a young quarterback. Um, so I really think that they should be throwing the bag at anyone who can come in and play at a decent level because filling holes on the offensive line is really what makes the rest of your offense go. You've got to be able to block. You just have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with Ben Johnson in Chicago and with his trickiness and trick plays and whatnot, I really look forward to see how that meshes with Caleb's like ability to extend plays and his big play ability as well. So, um, yeah, and transitioning to this Sunday, Bills Chiefs, I feel like we've seen this movie a million times and it feels almost like predictable of how it's gonna go, like a late game that the Chiefs just managed to pull through. But how do you think this game will play out?
I think it's going to be exactly like that.
$100%.
I think it's going to be a shootout. Just because Josh Allen is playing like impeccable football right now, to be honest. Like it's honestly insane the year that he's had and how he's eliminated turnovers from the equation. It used to be
Mhm.
like, yeah, Josh Allen turns over the ball a lot, but that's something we accept because he also creates a lot of big plays. Now he's just doing all the big plays without any of the turnovers. So I think they will be able to keep up in this game. I don't think he's gonna give Kansas City some big breaks that just totally change the trajectory of the game. I think they will be right there. But ultimately, I think in a lot of these games and these playoff games, when you've got two equal quarterbacks, two offenses that you trust a lot, it's going to come down to which coach makes the right decisions late in the game. And I think from the history of Sean McDermott and Andy Reid, I probably just trust um, Andy Reid and Mahomes to get it done, just because Sean McDermott and his conservative defensive play calling, and he's even had like a lot of game management blunders this year in late games. Like we remember the Texans incident
Yeah. Yeah.
set up that game winning field goal. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
fully trust McDermott. I don't think he has a very sound process in some of these close games. I think he kind of got away with one against Baltimore, settling for that field goal when he could have just gone a few yards and totally put the game away. And he
Mhm.
had to rely on this insane drop on what should have been a wide open 2-point conversion to send it to overtime. So
Mhm.
I do trust the Chiefs a little bit more, and I think they will win in a close shootout that does come back down to the final possession because Roger Goodell wouldn't let anything else happen.
It feels inevitable.
You
Yeah.
talked about you talked about the Eagles Commanders game too, and how, in one of their earlier matchups this year, how a bunch of stuff went Washington's way, which led them to be able to like just squeak out the game. So you said that your
Mhm.
Super Bowl prediction is Chiefs and Eagles, a rematch of Super Bowl 57.
Yeah.
Um, like Jad said, with the Chiefs, we've seen this movie before. The This year, I felt like even though they were undefeated for a while, like I felt like this was like the worst that they were playing in a while, and they were just getting like crazy breaks. Like
They were.
the the blocked field goal kind of like sealed it for me. I was like, I'm not watching
Mhm.
any more of these games. Like if this is how it's gonna end every time, and like
That was
So curious.
hilarious.
I like obviously Mahomes is incredible, okay? Like not
Devil man.
discounting anything from that. But I am really not trying to hear the Mahomes Brady comparisons if he three-peats. I mean, I'm already hearing it a little bit. I don't think it's credible at all yet. Obviously, he's great. He's up there. I don't think he's touching Brady yet, but um Jad, don't give me that look. Um I don't know. If they win this year, I know that that's going to be all that's talked about on those sports shows for a while. And I mean, he's going to have a case. Like three-peating in the Super Bowl is wild, but do you think that the Eagles could, kind of shake things up this year? We've seen that like Jalen Hurts is not at the level that he's been in the past, but also they've been able to kind of like give him a little bit of a break and rely on the run game at times.
Yep.
And, you know, um, I personally think that the Eagles are very polished roster-wise and dominant up front on both sides of the ball. Like you stress the importance of the trenches, and that's kind of like the blueprint right there.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so Howie Roseman's been able to build a great roster this year. I feel like their best chance at contention in a while. And if your Super Bowl prediction is true, Eagles Chiefs, how do you think that game would kind of play out?
Yeah, I mean, Philly 100%, regardless of how outgunned they would be at the quarterback position, they have the edge in the trenches. And if anyone can contain Chris Jones, and if anyone can kind of punish the Chiefs' aggressive defensive scheme down the field, it's them. So I think if we got to the Super Bowl, it's always tough to bet against Mahomes. Like that's just something that I don't really like to do. But I also don't want to be lazy in that thinking and just pick the Chiefs because they have Mahomes. I think if you look at how the game would actually go, the Chiefs' limitations in the passing game would probably catch up to them, especially with how good Vic Fangio and the Eagles' defense is at
Oh yeah.
bottling things up.
Yeah.
And I think that this Chiefs defense specifically not quite as good as in previous years. They're good. Like I trust Spags, but at a certain point, we've seen some teams just with their receiver play and everything make things happen and run on them and give their quarterback time. So I do think they're more exploitable than in the past because their defense was amazing the last two Super Bowl years.
Mhm.
I probably would pick Philly. I probably would, especially because Jalen Hurts would finally be able to probably get healthy. Like that's been a kind of big storyline for him. He was injured coming into the playoffs. He got banged up, but now you would get that extra off week, and maybe we do get a performance, the closest thing we've seen since that signature performance in the Super Bowl, where he really was amazing. Like that's the best we've ever seen him, and he just
Yeah.
hasn't really shown that since. So I think I would pick the Eagles. And I did that 2 years ago because my process was once again, they have the better team. I'm not just going to pick the Chiefs because they have Mahomes. But I think I would stick by my process because I like you say, I believe in the trenches and I think that would decide a lot. And I also just think their skill talent is far superior to Kansas City and they could break the game open very quickly.
Yeah, and going back to that Philly defense, like you were talking about with Vic Fangio, completely turned them around. And
Yeah.
the
Absolutely.
talent that they have, especially in the back end this year, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Reed Blankenship. I honestly feel like I could be wrong, but I feel like Darius Slay has been making a lot of plays this year. Like when in years
As
past he might have shown signs of like slowing down a little bit. Like I feel like anytime it's a clutch moment, he's always somewhere around the ball, always gets his hands on the ball. He had a like nasty PBU last week.
Mhm.
A
yep.
lot of big plays, and I feel like this is the year where that defense has been completely unlocked. And obviously the pass rush is great, but I feel like it's really the secondary that has kind of tied it together
Yep.
fully. And that could be the difference. Like you said, the receiver talent with Kansas City is a little iffy this year. Um, they lost Rashee Rice for the year. Xavier Worthy, explosive, but also like you don't know yet really if he's like a go-to guy and if he can be that
Mhm.
type of player. Um, but like, it's kind of always it's kind of similar to how the Patriots did it. Patriots never really ever since like Randy Moss, they haven't had like the X receiver that completely changes the defense's game plan. The years that we won the Super Bowl, it was like Amendola, Edelman, Chris Hogan, like guys like that. Like Mahomes has his guys. Like Juju found his way back to the Chiefs, and he's been great for Mahomes as an option. They got DeAndre Hopkins, great player, but kind of on like the back nine of his career, um, which again is similar to how a lot of Patriots receivers were older guys, like where, other teams kind of gave up on them and they just exploded because of the quarterback and because of the system. So that would be a super exciting Super Bowl to see. I feel like the storylines on both sides match up pretty well, and it would just be like something that could kind of go either way, and you just don't really know until you start to see how the game is going to unfold. But yeah, I mean, Super Bowl is the end of the season. I'm going to use that as an opportunity to wrap this up. Um, Nico, we really appreciate you coming on today and just chopping it up with us. We appreciate you
Yeah.
taking the time, had some fun conversations, and hopefully we could have you back on in the future. We can discuss more.
Yeah, no, it was great. I feel like we had a lot of interesting discussions. I'd be happy to be back sometime.
Next time when Drake May wins a Super Bowl, we can talk about
Yeah.
the Dolphins are contending for the number
Be at
one.
the bottom of the division, but we'll be
Yeah.
tanking for Arch Manning, so it's okay.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, again, thank you so much. Thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the Timeout. We know we've been gone for a while, but hoping to be back and stay back for now. So thank you guys again for tuning in. I'm Amir Meritosh with my co-host Jad Nizam. This is Nico from Elite Takes, and we'll see you guys next time out.